The goal of assessment designers is to have an accurate inference to a construct. Using a 5-step process, Tracey Hall explains what elements are necessary in designing construct-relevant assessments, and provides examples of how construct relevance can break down.
To think about construct relevance in assessment is just the number one thing. That's absolutely the right thing to do, with that end goal of that we want to make an inference about what the student's knowledge of that construct. So we need to think about the way in which we're going to provide information for the learner. What is the stimulus that's getting them to respond to something and show their knowledge? We need the student to interact with that information or that stimulus in some form or another. They need to have some sort of an opportunity to produce a response. And they need an opportunity to show their understanding. And so that's usually the production of a response. Then we need to be able to interpret that response. And then the final thing is the interpretation of the student's ability to have that response, and our step to infer construct knowledge is what's key. If between one of those steps we have a breakdown of some sort, then you really can't do a good job inferring construct knowledge. In other words, you don't know if the response that the person has put down really represents their knowledge about that skill. In thinking about those 5 steps, and in thinking about where breakdowns occur, it can happen in any of those places. A common area where that occurs is the interaction with the construct. In many of the ways that we set up assessment items, we have multiple things that the student must do to then interact with the construct, act on that, and then show their knowledge of that. There are multiple steps that the students need to go through. They might need to read something, then identify the top 5 things, and then select one of those and write about it. Let's say that's the task that we're up to. At that level, just the basic directions of having to figure out all of those component pieces, if it's part of a full paragraph of information, breaking that down, keeping it in your working memory, and then acting upon it can be a real challenge. So that interaction with multi-stepped tasks, content kinds of issues with students. They have to read, they have to remember, they have to write. Another place where we have a huge breakdown for many students is that production of a response. And I was kind of talking about that a bit ago when I was mentioning that students might have a challenge just in the physical kind of a skill that they're being required to do. They may have less experience in keyboarding, and this happens to be on a computer. They may not have the familiarity with the format. When we think of standardized tests, how often do we do bubbling, filling in bubbles for things? Sometimes that a spatial relationship challenge could be really huge for students. They know what the response might happen to be, but if they have a spatial challenge in figuring out where on the sheet does the answer to this problem go, and how does the bubble relate to the answer that I see over here, all of those kinds of tasks that are required to produce the response are construct irrelevant. In other words, they don't tell us how well the student understands the question or can operate on that question, but they're tasks that are required to show the response. So there's a large opportunity for breakdowns in that system when it comes to the production of responses as well.